Okay, we're rocking and rolling here with Dr. Eric Goodman and Jessie Salas from Foundation Training, and very happy to have you guys on. I'm huge fans of your work, so thanks for carving out some
Thank
time.
you for making the time for us too. Appreciate it.
Um, well, one thing I got to ask you that somebody wanted me to ask was, do you still have that yellow? I think it's a Ford pickup truck that you've probably had forever.
I haven't had
That
it
thing is
nearly,
pretty
yeah, I
sweet.
haven't had it nearly as long as you would think. And I ended up, we left Kauai a handful of months ago, and I ended up selling it to a dear friend of mine that is keeping it in great condition out there, and I'll get to use it when I'm over there here and there. So, but oh, whoa, what a
Those
great
things.
truck.
Yeah, I had a blue one. I call it the Blue Goose. It was a '91 extended cab that
Nice.
you could hear it coming from 5 miles away, but it was awesome. I loved to drive it anywhere you
So
want.
this was an 85
Um,
F250. It was the first international diesel engine they put into a Ford. So it had a school
mhm.
bus engine driving this Ford, and it was unreal. It was just such a great truck. Yeah, I miss it. I'll have another one day.
What so I got a ton of questions for you, and I could talk to you guys forever. But so for people who might not know what foundation training is, can you just give a somewhat of a summary to kind of introduce them to it? Um, I've sent it, as I told you guys before we came. I've sold it to at least 2 dozen, 3 dozen people to say you guys got to follow this, especially if you're golfers
Mm-hmm.
or anybody looking to feel better, heal an injury, etc. You could just touch on what foundation
Yeah,
training is, so people have a better understanding who aren't, maybe they're following the normal golf fitness or training or rehab things, and they're not so much aware of what you guys do.
sure. So foundation training began as my personal remedy for my chronic back pain. And this was 2007, 2008, 9. Around 2009, I had taught it to some people in '08. And then in about 2009, I had graduated chiropractic school. So I started bringing this idea as sort of an alternative to getting adjusted, to working in kind of compartmentalized treatments of localized back pains. And what it became was this thing that I just continuously invested myself in. All of my time for over a decade now that is not spent with other people is spent kind of investigating movement and how my injuries can remain protected. And in that time, over the past now 10, 11, 12, 13 years, there's been folks like Jesse and a couple others that have really helped me ramp up the innovation in this work and see it from multiple perspectives. And what we have now with foundation training is a body weight based exercise protocol that corrects the vast majority of chronic repetitive use strains and injuries, including herniations in the spine, including facet joint syndromes and plantar fasciitis, and the things that you hear about on a very regular basis that it's very hard to figure out why they don't get better. And what foundation training does is it provides a really good overall integrated approach. Integrated meaning the muscles of the body are very functional together. They're coordinated and cooperative together. He never does it long. Okay. So with that integrated muscular approach, you're learning posterior chain back of the body support, and you're learning an active alignment where you're doing it yourself of the spinal column and the rib cage.
Can I give a simplistic coach perspective on this one? For the golfers out there, what I like to say for everybody from a coaching standpoint is that it's going to optimize whatever it is you're looking to really improve on. You're going to optimize the way you feel, the way you function. It's going to address those chronic pains in a very fast kind of way, but then it has carryover for it. What we've seen time and again is carryover in whatever sport that person is bringing into. And I've heard golfers are known for they'll spend anything to improve a few yards on their swing. And what I say is, you don't have to invest a lot of money. What you have to invest in is time. And if you're willing to put in 10, 15 minutes, not a million isolation drills, but 10, 15, 20.
Hang on, guys. I lost you for a second. The audio cut out.
So a full body connection drill, because our body is a system, that's how it functions, and that's what Eric's designed us around. You're going to see that come out, and it's not suddenly you need to mimic a pose in your golf game. It's just going to come out, And what I say for everybody is try it, and in 2-3 weeks, just see what changes for you.
Yeah, but it does it go back to Eric? Is with your medical background and all the things that you guys have both studied, that the body does have a propensity to want to heal itself,
That
and that
that is
if it's been
so the
injured,
body wants to be efficient, and the most efficient way a body can
right?
be is healthy and aligned and functional, where muscles are not necessarily compensating for lackadaisical abilities or efficiencies in other muscles. They're just continuously balancing each other out. The body wants that intensely. The body has what would be considered kind of an innate, whatever your belief is, nature given, God given, adaptivity given drive to get better. Not just to like feel better, but to get better at every efficiency it needs to perform throughout the day. So, yes, it absolutely wants to get better, but we do have to get out of our own way. Very often we intellectualize treatments and rehabilitations, and the intellectual approach to a treatment is reductionistic. It reduces the body to a piece of the puzzle that's malfunctioning. But the body is not reductionistic, it's systemic. It is a number of systems collaborating together to drive this body towards feeling well innately. So if you're only looking at one piece of the puzzle, you're dismissing the puzzle. And that's what we offer with movement, is a whole body, holistic approach to correcting posture, correcting breath, and overall correcting stability in the body so that it can heal, with stability.
It's interesting you bring up the breath, because if anybody sees your guys' work online, you have a lot of breathing videos, postural breathing videos, and I do the 10 minute uh, breathing exercise. First thing I do when I get out of bed, it's part of my routine. Then I'll do your 2 minute founder to to loosen up, or get muscles releasing where they might have gotten tight from sleeping or what I did the day before. Then I do my cold shower, and then I go do my day. But the breathing is, I think, a big aspect that a lot of people miss, and that's an integral part of your
A
system.
lot of folks that want to have sort of a cognitive dissonance to what they should be doing for their well-being would say something like, you can't teach me how to breathe. I know how to breathe. I'm breathing all day, every day. What do you mean I don't know how to breathe? Well, you're right. You're right.
Hmm.
You do know how to breathe. But the way you know how to breathe is metabolically and structurally ineffective in comparison to the way that you could relearn to breathe. And what that is that's not a timing thing. It's not even so much a through the nose or through the mouth, although we do recommend through the nose for a very different reason than other people recommend it. There's a number of chemical reasons and physiological reasons to inhale through your nose. From our standpoint, these nostrils are much smaller cavities than the mouth. It's much harder to pull air in. It requires more muscular dependence around the diaphragm and around the rib cage for
Hmm.
that inhalation to occur. So the way that we correct breathing is mechanics exclusively. Like, we don't play with the timing necessarily, although you can, and you can plug in all of the wonderful knowledge of breathing that's available to the mechanics of
Like
decompression.
like a box breathing.
Sure, any of them.
Like, so there's like a box breathing, but you guys are dealing in a different aspect of the breathing. It different from, say, a James
Mm-hmm.
Nestor, Patrick McEwen, or even
Yeah,
a Wim Hof.
of whom we believe in all those guys' work, and we recommend all those guys' work, and we recommend people read Breathe by Nestor, and Patrick's books as well.
Hmm.
So what we're saying is, listen to them for how to breathe, listen to us for where to breathe, and use that corrective process that we teach you in decompression breathing when you also learn various abdominal breath techniques and diaphragm breath techniques that are out there. But use that preliminary expansion breath that we teach you so that you're primed and structurally sound for all of the others.
Yeah, I would have to imagine, if you're structurally at a disadvantage, crooked, twisted, whatever it is, that doing the way breathing the way that they want you to is going to be compromised, and that you're not going to get as much benefit out of it as you should. If your spine is and your rib cage is askew, you're not able to breathe to your maximum capacity in one lung versus the other one. It's going to cause inefficiencies and just wreak havoc for somebody who's trying to be healthy or come back from combat an injury.
Yeah, it puts you at a disadvantage. I mean, he taught me a lot of breathing. I've taught him a lot of breathing. Our experiences in life have combined to sort of both have a better understanding of breathing. And without those experiences of having to heal and having to be injured and having to kind of figure it out, having to lift heavy loads, having to do it sometimes under exhaustion when he was working as a firefighter, and having to figure out a quick, how do I get stable? How do I get this out of my system? There is no one technique that works for everybody. There's no one style of breathing that will make you heal better than other styles of breathing. The skill of breathing well and the somatic skill of sensing where you're breathing and how you're breathing is significantly more important than any style of breath. So we're building a skill of understanding the breathing process, feeling it in various ways, but ultimately having a cage and a torso that can support any of those ways well. That's the goal.
Right. So as all these things help posture, and golfers are notorious for having bad posture. And Jesse, as you mentioned, golfers will spend a small fortune on how to hit it 5 yards longer, but they won't spend anything or don't want to spend anything on how to make their body move more efficiently or be healthier. And there's so much information out there today which can be beneficial and it can be detrimental if somebody doesn't know where to go. I got lucky that I found you guys largely through other guests who were on this show. But the definition of what good posture is, how has that gotten maybe distorted in today's world versus what you guys are teaching?
Well, what I look at with that, especially when we talk about distorted posture and good posture, bad posture, is how do you feel and how are you functioning? You know, when I look at athletes across the board, whether they're 8 years old or 80 years old, and regardless if it's golf, surfing, or weightlifting, if you go into your sport and you look like a lowercase c with your hips tucked under your rib cage dropped over, your head tracking forward, you're not going to, for one, let's go to performance. You're not going to perform optimally. You're probably not going to feel the best either. And if you're trying to get an expansive breath, that you're just putting yourself in a position where that's not physically possible. You're pinning and compressing and collapsing in on your diaphragm, where Eric talks a lot about this in the course, is that when we're doing a decompression breath, a 360-degree expansion of the rib cage. So think of when most people want to go sides and front, we're talking breathing into the back of your rib cage, the sides of your rib cage, the chest, which is kind of a taboo thing in the wrong context. So we don't want people to be fearful of breathing into the chest. I'll touch on that in a second. But being able to have that 360 breath where we're also lengthening the neck so that we're using these powerful neck muscles to lift the weight of the head up and off. And what we see is suddenly you've made space to have a complete breath. Suddenly, through practice, your posture is starting to shift. You naturally are moving with healthy, reinforced posture instead of collapsing. So I say for the golfer and like all this breathing talk, in my mind, I go, well, how do I go about this? To me, you generally want to see your golf game improve. We've got you curious. It would be start your day with the 10 to 12 minute foundation workout. When you drive to play golf, when you get out of the car, do 2 to 3 minutes of decompression breathing and a founder, which Eric's pulling into now. He's reaching the hips and the hands away from each other. We're going to have a little bit of the toes spun in so that we're internally rotating, and he's lengthening his glute muscles, his butt muscles. We want to lengthen them back out so that the tendency is not for the butt to cinch down and tuck under us. So think if you're walking around like a tightwad and rounding the shoulders. But if you get 4 to 5 minutes of that in the parking lot, you're getting ready to load into the golf cart. You do a little bit right there. If you learn how to tension the muscles and you can start to integrate everything, you're getting your whole body recruiting and working together and communicating, and then you're going to take that into your game. Now you've got the space to breathe, and then, hey, you've got a very critical shot. I might do 2 or 3 big decompression breaths, and I'm going to go and do like a real quick box breathing as I dial in, calm everything, quiet everything, and be open and not in this collapsed, tight, trying to breathe, trying to focus, and make something critical happen. And that goes back to firefighting. If I was riding to a big call, I'm getting big, I'm breathing big, I'm moving in the back of that truck, and I'm preparing my mind so that I can respond collectively, not just react in the moment to what I've got in front of me. So there's this carryover for whatever application you want to put in. That would be a quick, like, how does it start to integrate with breathing, with posture, with everything?
Yeah, because there would be. Did you find that when the body is out of positioning that has caused it stress for X amount of time, X meaning weeks, months, years, that especially as a firefighter, that the ability to think more clearly once you put the body in a better state, that takes stress and everything off. The cortisol levels seem to come down to manageable or normal, if that's not a word anymore, and that you can mentally function better because you're going into life-saving situations. And I only say that because golfers say, well, the stress in golf is equivalent to, or the mind capacity and focus is similar to what a surgeon would be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking at the elite levels, but when you're in life-altering situations like you were as a fireman, do you guys find that having the body in better positions allows you to think more clearly, the same in a similar fashion that, let's say, eating healthier would be better than eating donuts for breakfast, and that you have better mental
Absolutely.
Maybe that's a poor analogy, but I'm trying
No,
to
I think they all go hand in hand. That's, I've learned so much from Eric in the importance of that diet as well as posture, breathing, and movement. But to be able to come off of that truck and just on the way there, instead of like you're thinking about what am I responding to, what's the report on the radio, and that's building your stress. When you can, to help emphasize with the golf game, because that makes sense to me, but when you're in a dead sleep and you wake up to the tones and you immediately hear house fire, you just went from hopefully your resting heart rate of 50 to 180, more than likely. You're flying and you just got a massive dump of adrenaline. The tools that I know to hold that in place is like I gear up and I'm trying to like get under control, listen, set my focus of what am I doing, where am I going, what do I have in front of me. But without a doubt, if I come off and I'm in this collapsed position, if I'm collapsing under the weight of my pack, the stress, and I'm in this forward-looking position, I'm going to breathe shallow. Hopefully I'm aware enough, but most people in that position, their mouth drops open, and now they're mouth breathing into the chest, up into, this is where the taboo discussion, we're breathing up and into the chest very shallow and feeding panic receptors. So you're piling on top of that stress. So without any real study in front of me, I'll say absolutely you're spiking cortisol, you're spiking adrenaline, you're feeding into this anxious, you're compiling it instead of controlling it. And that was always the goal. That was what we looked at as like a fireman that, would come to our unit on special operations, was a guy that could come off the truck in chaos and control that stress response enough to think and make good decisions, and then not only make a good decision, but then get the job done. And so you can put that into golf. Same thing of coming out in this high stress moment and controlling it. What tools do we have? Fix your posture, fix the way you breathe, learn to train your breathing. There's, as we talked about, get your posture right, but then fine, 10 minutes every morning of doing box breathing. How does that make me respond? Go into a high stress moment. Can I apply that? Using, these tools, the thing is, people will spend money, but I find people have a hard time investing time. And the investment.
It's amazing, isn't it? Even as little as 10 minutes. Oh, I'm so busy. It's like, you're busy on your phone, scrolling through.
You're just looking at other stuff.
We're easily distracted.
Yeah.
And let's face it.
I can't knock it too hard because that's how I found you guys. So I'm not going to, maybe 1% of it is good, but 99% of the time people spend on that shit is time that they could be fixing. They could do, like you said.
Well, I want to shift that back to Eric, because in that moment of box breathing, let's even say that investment in pain, and people wanting to get better, and you hear it more. I mean, I hear it a lot. You hear it more than everybody. And what would you say the investment of practice to see the actual return?
It's so minimal. It really is. And you can ask any legitimate athlete, from golf to surfing to baseball, football, soccer, water polo. And anybody, no matter what the vector of force, they know how to focus by the time they've gotten to a good place in their sport. And they can then take that same kind of disciplined ecosystem they create for themselves before they move into their competition day. And they can add, if they haven't already, this posture technique, this breath technique that doesn't change their protocol in any way, shape, or form. It just gives them a better structure and more structural integrity in which to perform the things they do. So in a lot of people that are using foundation training for a warm-up, they already have an 8 to 10 minute protocol that they follow. And what we will do is we will make sure that that is bookended by decompression breathing that puts the shoulders, the head, and the spine in the right position, and then just a handful of practiced hip hinges. And in something like golf, the repetitive thing that client would want to do is, because there's so much convergence of the shoulders in the swing, they're going to want to make sure that their lat is programmed right before they golf to diverge the shoulders away from each other, and not just the posterior capsule. You're not letting the back of the shoulder do the work. You're making sure that the torso is doing the work in any direction. And what that looks like is this. You know, timing a little breath pattern with a little hinge pattern with a little shoulder and wrist movement. And the people that warm up accurately for any sport they do perform better in the sport than if they didn't warm up, if they didn't prepare their nervous system and their ranges of motion and the forces they anticipate, be it breathing or kind of outside the body forces. You just come a little closer to where you're going to get to in your warm up.
So as you guys did, and for anyone listening, if you're on your app or whatever, the video will be on YouTube and it's on the website, and I'll send you the guys as well. You can do it as you wish. When you do the hip hinge, and because some people will do it incorrectly, and on, I think it was on your Facebook page or one of your sites, there was a picture of with a red X, say don't do it like this, and here's how to do it. So it's very easy to learn how to do it correctly. But can you explain the importance of the internal rotation of the hips? And for some of you out there who aren't medical lingo, it's where well, I'll let you explain it, but also the inversion of the feet, where the outside parts of, of your feet are parallel to one another, as opposed to being everted, where most people are walking.
I want to give one quick for the people out there trying to conceptualize what we're saying. Think of that if your feet are stuck at 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock, toes out, that's external rotation. And when we talk about internal rotation, we want to be thinking about more along the lines of inside that 1 o'clock and towards basically both toes kind of angling towards 12 o'clock. So they're turned in a little bit, but it happens from up at the femur joints. I'm going to let Eric give all the wire.
So, yeah. The basis of the internal rotation that we provide in just about every single pose in foundation training, with the exception of our gorilla lift, our surf squat, and our conventional squat. Those are a more neutral, subtle external rotation stance because of the big knee and hip motions involved. But in 22 of our other poses, so 22 out of 25 poses, we have this corrective angle where imagine a scroll closing towards center from each leg. And that inward rotation is subtle, but it's very definitive. And you spoke very accurately. When you're in the right position, it feels like you're standing inside of a 90-degree angle box instead of outside of it. Like your feet, like your heel to pinky toe is a straight parallel line on each foot, which feels like a 3 to 5 degree internal rotation of the hip joint. The only reason it feels that way is because our hip joints are so used to external rotation. This
is that
it's from
sitting.
sitting.
So much? We're such a sedentary society.
It's a number of things. The first thing, take sitting out of it. As soon as you get into a heel on a shoe, that's even a half inch to an inch, where the heel is a half inch to an inch higher than the front of the foot, you naturally push the knees away from each other about 3 to 5 degrees, just by pressing up on the calves that little bit. So that's the first insult to the hip joint of repetitive stress that we don't even notice until years down the line. The second one is sitting. but it's sitting combined with the head carriage dropping a couple inches and moving forward a couple inches. That's where the external rotation comes from, is this, more than anything else.
That's interesting. That it comes from the head and neck.
And it's because
position.
as the head drives forward, it makes the lower body make space for the torso moving forward. And that pulls the hip joints apart and leans them further into external rotation. The reason it stays there is called adaptive shortening. The glute muscles, the muscles that are responsible for externally rotating the hips in a healthy way, they adaptively shorten. They don't tighten. They don't force themselves to contract. They learn that neutral for them is a externally rotated, shortened position, and that's how they learn to support the body. It's back asswards, literally. It's like the wrong way. It's wrong. It's just wrong. But we learn it and we teach it to ourselves over and over and over and over. And the idea of being kind of tight-assed, anxious, nervous, maybe a little bit overcompensatory, that's where we stay in external rotation. For golfers, that's a real problem, because in order for the hips to hinge, even somewhat decently, you have to pass the pelvis through the leg bones. And what the glutes do when they crunch together and adaptively shorten is they block that so that the spine does it instead. That's shit behavior. It can't happen. It will hurt you. You will end up with back problems. You will end up with leg problems. You will end up with shoulder and neck problems the longer you continue that process, because you're teaching your body that biomechanics don't mean anything. The imprint that your body has is not important. Instead, what you think is right is important, what you've been doing the whole time.
Well, that makes a ton of sense, because one of the biggest problems in golf, and I think it's gotten exponentially worse. The term is early extension. I think TPI kind of coined that phrase, where the pelvis is moving closer to the target line, and if what as you're saying it, they don't know how to hinge because their posture is significantly compromised. Now, as they start their downswing, they're moving in closer, and it's just, I after learning more of your material and learning the 22 decades of having back issues myself, putting all these pieces together and looking back at my own career that didn't get as far as it should have, I thought, because largely in part because of back problems. It's what drove me from the game. That was a major problem of mine. And I am certain that if I would have had my body in a better position, if I could have met you guys 20 years ago, I think it would have been a lot
We would have
different.
had to figure it out together at that point.
Yeah, I thought you might say, but it would have been worth the journey.
The ability to hip hinge accurately, which includes this really important thing too. Sorry about that. That was a message coming in. So this tension point up top right here is equally important to the very low, the lowest part you can feel in your torso, right in the pelvis.
And that's at the base of the skull.
The base of the skull. And everybody listening can point right and touch the back pointy bone where the skull and the neck meet. That's your EOP. It's a part of the skull that's very important because it's a leverage point. You don't want this point aiming down. You want this point aiming up. That leverage shift is what allows you to hip hinge accurately. And more importantly, when you rotate, it allows you to rotate on axis instead of off axis. You want to rotate on axis from the hips to the head so that the movement is governed all the way. It's like a flowy, integrated motion instead of what we talked about at the very beginning, this block where you compartmentalize these areas of the body and they don't work together quite well.
I mean, it makes total sense because cervical spine will mirror lumbar spine, won't it? As far as any curvature in any point.
Unless you're forcing it one way or the other, but basically the very top of the skull where I just talked about, that pointy bone where it meets the neck, and then where the tail of the sacrum and the pubic symphysis intertwine, that's the low edge of the pulley and the top edge of the pulley that interact together.
on the note of forcing it,
awesome.
the one thing I want to say is that that's what we see a lot, and you hear it coached a lot. And if you go on Instagram and you're looking for how do I fix my posture, you're going to basically see, and this is all coaching to you of weightlifting, is either pack the chin or boxing, which then pushes into that lower cervical, and you're not addressing, again, a systemic thing, a whole body. The other one we see is, well, let's fix the posture by pinning the shoulder blades back, pushing the chest out. So now we're simply taking one pattern and going into the other one that's a pain-causing pattern, which is thrusting the rib cage out the other way. And so when you talked about, you had said that people are hinging wrong, and what I'll say is, for us, internal rotation is everything, and I'll say one thing is, don't suddenly fear squatting with external rotation. It's not that suddenly these things are horrific. When I weightlift, when I started kettlebell, when we deadlift, we are externally rotated. But before and after, we always start with internal rotation and challenging the muscles of the internal rotation, of the medial chain, up the inner thigh muscles to balance and pull so that they're all fired and our bodies are going through the right patterns before we challenge them in these exercises. So don't fear external rotation. I know that's kind of a thing right now. But what I want to say is 2 ways you can hinge wrong, regardless if you're doing foundation training. One is going to be that you just, instead of getting the hips back behind the heels, you bow out and over your toes. And so you can feel the weight going into the balls of your feet. And when I do that, I'm almost weightless on my heels are almost coming off the ground. So what you want to think about is the butt is sitting back. And if you do it right, you almost naturally have to bring your hand out or you're going to fall because you're counterbalancing yourself. So we want to make sure that we're hinging. And the other one is that we're not, this is big for golfers, that we don't just dump the pelvis and go backwards, because then we start compressing that low lumbar sacral area. Yeah.
So dumping the pelvis, if someone's listening, is where the rear end goes. The traditional way to describe a posture is lift your rear end like you're trying to sit on a stool too high.
Yes.
That is not correct.
That's,
you want the pelvis more neutral.
But I will say that's better than most do. But let me show you that statement, kind of the idea. So Jesse first is gonna lift from his spine. He's gonna kind of do a hypermobility hip hinge. So just watch him go through it. You see, a little bit more profile. So facing goes right back. So see this divot? That is not supposed to do that. That is major thoracic extension and major lumbar extension. So in this position, he's going to fix it. Watch how he rounds out the thoracic extension. See that thoracic curve?
Yeah.
That's everything. As long as it doesn't come from the lumbar curve is now supported by a big thoracic spine instead of an extended thoracic spine. This curve is kyphotic. It has to go this way, like a turtle shell. If you're pushing that the other way, you're pushing it down, and it throws everything else in the head off. Watch when Jesse lifts up now. So first he's going to do it wrong. He's going to lift with the spine to stand up. That's wrong. That's hypermobility. Now watch the hip joints with a powerful torso leverage his entire spine. You see the difference there? Mm-hmm. So that's the difference of foundation training principles at play versus figuring it out yourself and sort of intellectualizing the movement. You think you're supposed to lift with here. You think you're supposed to do it from here. You think it's supposed to do this. But if you go by feeling, you very quickly learn what it's supposed to feel like, and stability has an extraordinary sensation. When you're stable in a movement pattern, you can move the world. You feel like everything is just connected, and you feel the forces going through you in this powerful X pattern. You can just move around. It moves you incredibly well with a lot of legitimate force. When you're out of that pattern through any version of hypermobility of the spine or loss of mobility of the spine, you're basically asking tissues to do what they can't do instead of going to where those hypermobilities are, strengthening them accurately. Going to where that hypomobility is, especially very often at the neck and at the lower spine, and instead of trying to instill hypermobility at the spine, using the hip leverage that we teach, using the posterior chain leverage that we teach to pull that curve back into place from the grand system instead of piecing it together.
when someone comes to you guys, regardless of what sport they play, or if they're just the average everyday person that go 9 to 5 and they just want to feel better, is there a somewhat of a common denominator range of time that once you put them through the beginning stages of your program that you see them start to feel better? Or is it just, that might be a dumb question, it's person dependent?
It's both. It has been for so many people, these two things. Remarkably faster than they expected and remarkably slower than they anticipated. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes it's really easy, especially with like a disc herniation or a sciatic pain or a spondylolisthesis. There's certain instabilities that we really understand the protocol very well for, and it's rare that we can't radically shift somebody within a few weeks. And then it's their job to continue. They got to continue, you know?
Well, yeah. As I was telling you guys, I did the original founder. That's and for everybody listening, I'll have the links to all these videos in the show summary so they can access it easy. But the third time, I could not get through that 10-minute video, and and before my lumbar spine just lit up on fire, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. But by the third time I did it, I was able to get through it, and I told you, 50% pain was gone. And stayed gone for a couple of days. Of course, I had to continue to do it, but that was one reason I wanted to ask that question. Is for some people out there who are in chronic pain and cannot get rid of it, and it's really affecting either their enjoyment of sport, life, etc. This stuff really does. I mean, it's legit. I'm here to tell everybody it's legit. That's why I asked you guys to come on. I really believe.
Well, I think I want to clarify one thing to your point as well for people listening. One is that if you're in chronic pain, if you're hurting right now, I'm going to hands down say you need to not start with a 12-minute video, but you'd be a candidate to go on our app and learn it step-by-step detail. In fact, anybody that's truly serious about getting the full benefit, it's like a martial art. It takes time of doing and consistently showing up, and you're going to unlock and you're going to start to have these aha moments on the course. You're going to start to notice different ranges. As you, I guarantee, can attest to, you're going to start noticing, oh, I'm foundering when I'm picking things up. I'm foundering when I'm doing random things. Your hips are hinging.
Huge.
And the low back burn, that's really what I want to touch on, the smoking your low back. What you're feeling, if it's both sides and in the muscle, which I always stress is,
yep,
you're feeling the low back being challenged. And what I say to everybody is when we're doing a founder, we're doing a handful of things. One, we're reminding the body you're supposed to have this stable spinal column while our hips are moving and our shoulders are moving. Same kind of concept you hear with the bird dog, which is an amazing exercise, but we don't have to get on our hands and knees and do this stuff to replicate it right before we go into our sport. But building that endurance, and then what I'd say is that workout is amazing, but getting on the app and learning it step by step, learning how to integrate the muscle chains, that's really where I look at now is the 12-minute video is an amazing wound bandage. But if you really want to heal it for the long term, and not only heal it, but know how to fix your body when it's acting out on you, because you can be any of us and we're going to have those moments. You start to get that connectedness and it just becomes a game changer. And then recognizing too, sometimes you need to get a set of eyes on you. And we have over 1,300 certified instructors. Reaching out and having someone watch you move. Like when I get bombarded on Instagram about this, that, and the other, I say, start on the app. If you're not getting the bottom of it, you need to pay for a coach to watch you move, and they're going to pinpoint, and they're going to either, you develop a relationship to work together, or let them give you, hey, you're dumping the pelvis. Hey, you're thrusting the ribs. You have a tendency to let the head track forward. You're bowing over instead of hinging back. Hey, you thought you were internally rotated. You're still turned out. Like, these are very common patterns we see all the time. So a trained set of eyes goes a long way in the journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially as you're trying to fine tune something, and it as I found out through years of pain, that it's the finer points of those muscles that if something is just slightly off, it can wreak havoc on everything else as different muscles look to compensate and fire. And as you talked about, as it twists and contorts the spine through the spiraling of the entire system.
You mentioned working with one of Ida Rolf's original students, and Ida Rolf has a quote that is just so perfect, Wherever you think it is, it ain't.
I thought it was gonna be the issues of the tissues. Because I just heard that one from another movement guy quoting Ida Rolf, and I love that her name's been coming up a lot.
She's one of the tops, and she was an MD that really took structural integration extremely seriously.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story that how she developed Rolfing. If anybody wants to take the time to read on that, how she developed it, came up with it, taught it. Well, very similar to what you guys are doing.
There's not really too many ways to do this other than going straight through the problems that you have and seeing if there's a method in there or some kind of knowledge in there that can be gathered and shared. That's it. And that's what you do.
You know, one question I want to ask you guys, and I heard it in one of your videos or one of your talks or lectures, is that, and this is where I really started hearing the music, so to speak, a little more from what you were saying, and that you had talked about the core and the traditional understanding of the core, and then what foundation training believes the core to be. And I had always had that theory, and just because I was a golfer who had worked out for 2 decades and studied this stuff, they said, well, you're not in this field, stay in your own lane. And I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't make sense. The core is not just your abs. That can't be true.
Okay.
It's got to be the core, everything that touches the spine, or everything that touches, certain things. But you guys elaborate on that. You're the experts.
If that guy was in my lane, I'd bump him right out.
With that big F-250. He's in a Prius.
So I wrote this in 2010. It came out in 2011. And it's
awesome book
called Redefine Your Core. Because the definition that exists, as you're stating, is just limited, compartmentalized, and it intellectualizes the belief that our belly button is the center of us. But it's not. The center of us is the pelvis, in particular the pubic symphysis is our center of gravity. It's the place in which the two hemispheres, the two halves of the pelvis, meet at a juncture in the center. The most important manipulator of that center core is the adductor muscles that attach at the very base of the pelvis. So one of the biggest, most important core muscles we have is completely below the pelvis, between the knee and the pelvis. Another remarkably important core muscle, because of the way that it positions us, it literally stands us upright, is the hamstring complex. That goes below the knee all the way to the bottom of the ischium, another pelvic bone. So now we have probably 40 to 60% of our core strength, and we haven't talked about anything above the pelvis yet. The glutes are very dominant as a part of the core. The transversus abdominis that wraps from the rib cage back here all the way down to the pubic symphysis. Again, not to the belly button, all the way down to that center of the human being, the center of gravity. So those are the core muscles. There's more. The obliques, the rectus abdominis, there's a lot. The iliacus muscle that lines the pelvis. They have to insert directly into the base skeleton of the pelvis. If it attaches directly to the pelvic structure, it's a core muscle. If it doesn't attach directly to that, it's accessory.
Yeah, that was one of the, people talk about various muscles, but they almost talk about it, the traditional sense, opposite of what you just said, that where they look at the abs and everything close to the abs as the focus of the core, and then they might talk about all the muscles that you just described, the TVA, the abductors, everything else as secondary. But I found that very interesting that you guys reverse that and are having tremendous success with it. It's got to be eye-opening to a lot of your industry.
Really had any pushback?
No, in fact, I've seen most of the people that I see pop up on different platforms talk that word for word, as I've heard Eric on TED Talks and different things. And, it's like, it's coming out more and more. I'm going like, I know where that came from. Because when I started doing foundation training in this book, I brought it to the firehouse. And I remember the guy who ran the wellness program read it in 2 days. And I would bring him all sorts of stuff. And he was always going, garbage. He came back, he's like, this is amazing. And then his next book came out, and the mechanics of decompression breathing. And, the concepts were just, what's going on here? When I look at, and as you're talking about compartmentalizing, I go for anybody using your body and wanting it to naturally integrate is if you're breaking your body into segments and training it that way, you're training your body to perform a certain way. Where with this, and I'll say is going, if you're looking for, well, how do I strength train correctly, is getting the body fired up, as I like to say with foundation training, so that all of these muscles are naturally on and working, but then you're bringing that into exercise that asks the body to function in very similar patterns. A deadlift. We're picking something heavy up off the ground, but we're reminding the body that the core, the hips, the hamstrings, the glutes, we're loading them and the spine is stabilized and along for the ride. The lats are engaged, pulling the bar into your body. If you're just doing kettlebell swings, these patterns are naturally happening where the hips are dominating, your center mass is stabilized, your lats are working, your body's working as a symphony instead of one instrument over there banging away at the keys trying to do all the work, and then we're going, why does this sound like shit?
That's actually very accurate.
You guys are surfers. Your free time is
these
spent
days. He's spending more time doing it than I am, but I'm jealous of that, and I will be doing it a lot more.
I pretend to be. We pretend to be surfers. It just depending on the environment you drop us in, we're either really impressive or we're really entertaining. It's one or the other.
It's one of the things I always want to do, but growing up through the early '80s and the Jaws, the whole thing with the Jaws, I get nervous just sticking my foot in the ocean. I mean, I would love to be able to do that. I just don't think I could
never
ever
goes
get out
away.
there on a surfboard and not.
You don't ever stop thinking about the man in the gray suit.
I would be I couldn't do it. I give you guys all the credit in the world, but I only say that because as somebody, if they're listening and they're going through your app, or they're going through your website, and you guys do have a golf section.
Yeah, we did.
You have a lot of sports on there.
We
but you
did
have a
that
golf
golf
section.
program that we have with Dr. Robert Duvall of TPI.
Yeah, it seems TPI always seems to grab the people who are doing some very cool and meaningful things before they become the mainstream. I'm surprised they haven't incorporated you guys a lot more.
I think there's a couple folks
maybe you're on their radar.
At the very top of TPI that have not quite let themselves truly look into what we do.
Yeah, it seems as an entity grows that and they add people that it becomes more difficult to continue on the same mantra that they did to get to that level. In other words, as you
it was through
described.
Dr. Bobby, who is one of the main players in TPI, one of the main teachers and instructors. It was through his knowledge of foundation training that he made that program happen with us. It was not because TPI was like, oh, Bobby, go check out what these guys are doing. He was much more like, hey, TPI, you got to know what these guys are doing.
So it is of your history, and I wish we had more time. I wish we had hours to just sit here and so people could learn more about it. But they can watch your videos and read your material, and they'll know more about it. But one of the things that you did was you worked with the Olympic polo team. And if I remember right, you restructured their training program and removed a lot of the weight training outside of, let's say, squats and deadlifts, if I remember correctly. And Jesse, you're the strength and conditioning coach for foundation training.
We can go a program director, but I headed up putting together that program that's on the app.
So at what point does doing a squat or deadlift become somewhat, the risk factor goes up as you're putting actual load on a spine and compressing it because and I'm playing a little devil's advocate here for somebody out there who might be thinking this. If you're compressing the spine and everything that you guys do is to decompress it, how do you walk that fine line of getting it stronger but not running a higher risk of damaging it in the process?
Yeah, go. I'll follow up.
Okay. So number one, the term compression is both good and bad. Certain compressive forces allow you to use your extremities better. And a lot of people that feel core strength occurs here are actually talking about core compression, which is very different. And the abdominal compression isn't an up-down compression. It's a circumferential compression that keeps the spine from having any movement. It's very important. Now, if you do that compression from here, we're already top to bottom compressed, which is the bad version of compression, is axial compression, which is bottom is stopped, top is stopped, and it's crunching more and more and more. That's no good. You don't want to add a lot of pressure to that system. So the first thing, if somebody can't deadlift or squat, the first thing you got to look at is how do the hips move and how does the spine compress? Is it the good kind, or is it the bad kind?
So the good kind would be, what's the circumference? It's squeezing in to stabilize, and the bad kind would be a
Yes.
vertical. So a horizontal compression versus a vertical for
easy
understanding.
Yes.
What I'd say with that is, like, especially with the person out there listening of how does this come in, is what I look at with anybody and when we're working with people is that, because this question came up not too long ago, is at what point can I start loading someone? For me, when I'm working with them, and I always start by saying I'm not a doctor and I don't always have Eric there to save me. So if I'm working with somebody, I want to see that one, they're moving well. Two, we can go through at least phase one on our app, and we've developed the ability to integrate muscle chains. That we've developed the ability to expand, elevate the rib cage, that when we squeeze the fingertips, we can get the lats to fire, because that sphere tension isn't just because it looks cool. We're integrating muscle chains through that. That when we hip hinge, that we're seeing the hips load back, that we can go into a gorilla lift comfortably. I see all that. I see a body weight clean squat. Great. We're going to start working from the top down, hinging with just a PVC pipe or a mobility stick, which I love. We're going to go into using just the barbell. Then we're going to practice lifting the kettlebell. Great. And it's going to be a gradual thing. I'm not worried about the load. But what I'm looking to see is that they've developed enough muscular endurance and motor patterning that when we start to load them, the muscle chains are doing their job. And as Eric said, we're getting healthy compression, because whether you're a 15-year-old athlete that I'm going to start easing into weights, or you're my parents, which I encourage all the time, is especially when we're getting into that 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, sarcopenia becomes real and osteopenia becomes real. The deterioration of muscle and bone. We've got to make sure we're loading frames so that's developing, but it's a process. Anything you'd like to add there?
I'll just say from a personal experience, I took over 10 years off of weightlifting. And in that 10 years, I developed foundation training, and that became my strength protocol. And it wasn't until Jesse became very full on with us that I started getting I know I can get a lot stronger. I was strong, not really. I was like body weight strong. I could do a bunch of pull-ups type things. So we started doing a little bit of kettlebells, and I initially started with the kettlebells. And I remember I had to learn how to really protect my spine again with foundation training, but I found that long lever approach that foundation training takes needs this little bit of compressive abdominal compression and circumferential, especially transverse abdominal compression. And when you get that, I felt a level of protection that I hadn't felt yet. Honestly, I was very good at strengthening my spine against my body's weight. But as soon as I would add load, I didn't feel safe yet because it wasn't there. Now, holy shit, it's very different. I've been training now for many years. I probably started 4 or 5 years ago, I guess. Mm-hmm. It was more like getting back into deadlifting, getting into kettlebells, getting into squatting a little bit.
Ballistic kettlebell swings. I mean, that's ballistic, and we haven't had an MRI, but Eric's spine is not, it's not as if that those things aren't there.
The injuries will never go away. The compression that I have L5S1, the degenerative changes that I have will never go away, but the muscular protection around those regions of my spine, and even more important than the muscle protection there at my low back, the muscle communication from my feet to my groin muscles, to my glute muscles, to my hamstrings, is completely preservative of the rest of my body. That's the difference. It doesn't I'm so strong in my legs now that it doesn't let my back even have the opportunity to try to take the weight that it shouldn't be taking. And that's the biggest change in my entire life.
Yeah, I used to be afraid, in the morning, if my remote control for my TV's on the other side of the bed. For years, I would think twice about bending over and reaching across the bed to grab it because something would twinge and something would fire. Since I've done your guys' stuff and I'm finally back in the gym consistently. I mean, I can go over a litany of COVID and other shit that just kept bumping me out. But now when I bend over, it's like, okay, there is no that fear. The fear is still there because you have that shit happen enough to you, and it hurts so bad, and it's so ingrained in your brain that I don't know if it's ever going to leave. But yes, the ability to bend over and grab something without any inhibition is a wonderful feeling that most people
Are
take
you
for
able to
granted.
feel the correlation and connection between the points of contact that we teach you on the feet and how that translates up the legs and kind of governs your movement?
It's come very slowly, but it's getting stronger and stronger as I've done. I would say that when I told you I did the foundation work, and after that third time it really got better. I would say that was a little over a year ago.
You're actually still quite new.
And I try to do the 10-minute. I actually use the 10-minute video as a warm up to when I go into the gym. So that will be my warm up before I do anything with the weights. And then I'll do on the days that I'll do the high intensity cardio training, you know, the 30 seconds on, coast for 60 seconds. When I'm done with that, I'll do your 8 points.
Oh yeah.
Which I almost hate Jesse because I sit there and watch him do it. And it took me months to be able to get to do all 8 of them.
What I'm going to say is like what you're doing too is another beautiful compliment to the gym and to the weightlifting, which is excuse me, what I harp on, especially when I see in the interwebs now of like never externally rotate your ancestor, like at the end of the day, zip it all back up. That like a Tabata of standing decompression. So decompress the spine, but internally rotate, get the muscles connecting those femurs to your pelvis, spiraling back in, decompress, lifting the spine up and off. Do some 8-point planks, get your thoracic curve doing its job while you stabilize and lengthen that core out. Powerful. And what I want to say when Eric was talking about the weightlifting is we didn't, the way we're going about it is being very deliberate as well. And that's what I stress for everybody is that unless your goal is to become a weightlifter or to do CrossFit, treating it like medicine, pull a couple lifts, relax, move around. Make sure you're integrating muscle chains. Do some gorilla lifts before you pull the deadlift. It doesn't need to be high rep. It doesn't need to be fast. The other one that I love to kind of touch on, because I do think that the concept helps people kind of get a better understanding, is that if you think about when we're lifting weights, we're working on our body's ability to produce force. When we're doing foundation training, you're hyper focusing on your body's ability to optimally absorb force. And so that complement comes out. And that's what I look at as almost any program out there is primarily focused on your body's ability to produce force. So that's why I say, like, you bring us into anything. I'll say for yoga, Pilates, doesn't matter, because we've worked with people in every arena just about now. Collectively, they see improvements as they optimize the way their body's absorbing force. And it's the recipe that Eric's put together through methodically studying anatomy, studying the breakdowns, and putting this together. And we get a lot of people that are like, well, I put this spin, I put that spin. Like, cool, if that works for you, great. But then we hear about people, well, the FT stopped working for me. Well, it's because you felt this spin that you thought you've created something amazing was ultimately breaking you down again. Like, there's so much time behind this. And in the age of the internet, everyone's looking for attention through something new and sexy. And so I always caution, be careful of that. There's some cool stuff out there, but be cautious of that because, you know, it's just, we're in an era where people are just looking to do anything for attention, accolades, and no long-term ramification in mind.
What is the difference? I mean, the 8-point plank Tabata that you guys do, it's a 20-second hold and a 10-second rest. And if anybody can get through that, all 8 of them, I bow to them.
With good technique.
The first time they do it.
With good technique.
Yeah, with spot on technique. But the difference between that and the one that you guys have on the app, where it's a 40-second hold and a 20-second rest, what is? Because I'm sitting here thinking when I saw that, because I've been doing the Tabata one, and I'm sitting here looking and watching you guys do the 40-second with the 20, and I'm like, I can't even get 8 with the 20 and 10. How the hell?
I think you could. I think you could, and I think that what I'd say the difference is actually the Tabata is harder because it requires that eat quick transitions, that you're able to pull into good technique each time. And Tabata is just a timer that, you use it in CrossFit and other modalities, but it's 20 seconds of work, 10 seconds of rest, 8 rounds, and it takes 4 minutes. It's a beautiful quick hit, and I use that for a lot of my personal foundation practice. But when we do the longer ones, that's more for people on the app where we're going, hey, get into position, have good technique. You should feel the abdominal being challenged, but at no point should you feel low back come in. And if you are, come out of it. We're not doing this for the ego. We're doing this to get your body into feeling well and training those patterns to become habitual.
A lot of people look at the 8-point plank and they just assume it's an abdominal exercise, and it absolutely affects the abdomen very well. I'm quite proud of how well it affects the abdomen because it's a teacher. But the purpose of that exercise has nothing to do with the abdomen. The purpose of the 8-point plank is to radically reposition the rib cage from an anterior unstable position to a posterior stable position under the guidance, tutelage, and tension of the muscles that surround the rib cage. So what it feels like is this awful abdominal contraction that is supporting you in this intense neck and hip contraction that's just like stabilizing the whole front line of you as you breathe this expansive kind of turtle shell thoracic curvature back into its place. Mm-hmm. The longer you hold it, the more your body gets the cue that this is where the ribs live. Not here, not here. They live up, back, and broad.
But I want to add one note. One note really fast because it's all about the rib cage. But I do look at is that it's also retraining that this TA, that think of your belly, ribs to pelvis is a neutrally supported cylinder, and we're not stuck to one side, to the other side. Maybe you have a dominant pattern in golf. You're always twisting to one side. And that's where I'm going to go specific of 8-point plank, founder. But then what you'll see in the golf program is a lot of Eric's spiraling exercises to unravel and untwist our chronic one-sided patterning.
All these different things that play.
Yeah, I see a lot of problems. So if I use myself as an example, the trail, I'm right-handed, so my trail side, my right leg, my right knee, I'll start at my foot. My right foot would roll in on your forward swing. My right knee would kick in. And then that just developed a pattern all the way up to where the structure was unsupported. And then I would, my right QL is so tight, where the left one is extremely flexible. And then it just exacerbated from there. So that 8-point plank for me was exactly how you guys just mentioned, Eric, where you talked about the chest. I call it popping a wheelie, right? Where it starts sticking out excessively. And Jesse, as you talked about re-establishing the rib cage with the pelvis and a cylinder, that's exactly the feelings that I got from it. It took me a good at least 4 to 6 weeks before that started taking hold, but where the muscles were just learning how to work. And then until I started feeling it, and I still to this day, because if I go out and play golf, that chest wants to come up as you get into your finish, and then I go do that 8-point plank, and it just puts it right back in position to where it's like, oh, the stress is off my body again, and things seem to be a little more relaxed.
Everything we teach has a much larger purpose of correcting the central tension of the body as opposed to like being a hard exercise. Many of them are very challenging because you're working with the entire pulley system of the body to reposition, to readdress and realign. But once you get it, you have access to those things extremely quickly. The learning curve is legitimate and significant.
When I saw that Tabata in there, because the only Tabata I was really familiar with was Dmitry Klokov.
Oh, man.
Tabata workout, that CrossFit.
That guy is impressive.
Crazy?
I followed him since he was an Olympic. He's a Russian Olympic, gold medalist, isn't he?
I think he was silver. He won the gold in the world championships, and I think he blew his shoulder the year he was supposed to blow everybody out of the water.
Ridiculously strong.
That guy's, he's a freak. Mm-hmm.
But a testimony to powerful hips and a strong, Olympic weightlifters. When people talk about pattern, they go, how do they do what they do? They've got extremely powerful hips and an extremely coordinated and connected upper body that can stabilize and support under extreme load. And they have great range of motion.
Yeah, because his rib cage never pops of the lower. It's always, and the amount of weights where he does that SOTS
Mm-hmm.
press, and I can't remember how much it was, a couple 100 pounds, where he's in a full squat, and you're watching this video just saying, what is this guy doing? And all of a sudden he stays squatted and he just presses over his head and his rib cage
Well,
never moves.
and that's the
His
difference too, though, when you look at true Olympic weightlifters, because that's a not to go into too much advance, but true Olympic weightlifters. And I'll say like any professional athlete at a high level is doing the work behind the scenes. So people see Olympic weightlifting and they only see the lifting, but a lot of those guys are doing, and women are doing, tons of range of motion work behind the scenes, tons and tons of practice so that their bodies are optimized before training and after training. So I look at that for everybody is, even if you're a hobbyist, your body's going to adapt to the positions you put it in most. So if you're not doing work to take care of it before, during, like if you're a person that's at the desk a lot and your life looks like, I wake up, I sit down, I drink my coffee, I stand up, I take a shower, I sit down in the car, I drive to work, I stand up, I sit down at my desk, and that's the pattern, your body's adapting to that. If you're playing golf all day long, you're adapting to that. And so recognizing that whatever you're doing, you need to balance it back to a neutral supported position to then put it into whatever you want to do. And that's what made me addicted to foundation training. It was, I'm a minimalist. How do I get the most out, like with my weightlifting now, with my body and my movements, how do I get the most return for the least investment? In fact, nothing has mirrored foundation, and I still take courses all the time for more knowledge, more bits, for more learning, but nothing I found mirrors it like this work.
There's a reason you're starting to see things that look a lot like foundation training popping up in a lot of other people's principles.
Yeah.
Because it works.
And it wasn't
Very simple.
around before 2011. And that's when there was enough of a shift in the work that we put out. The TED Talk, the book, the eventual certification, the kind of steady infiltration of somehow finding these, we didn't find them, they found us, these interesting patients and clients, and a lot of them being celebrities, a lot of them being influential. It started to really push our work out to places. And now, 11, 12 years later, you can absolutely see foundation training principles beginning to pop up in a lot of people's
degrees of internal rotation. I never saw that, ever.
All of a sudden, the right thing to do is to expand your ribs and expand your lungs, getting ready for certain movements. It's like, what about all the compression stuff you guys just talked about?
What about this? Yeah. I mean, it's cool though. It's what you want to see from the work. You want to see that. I'm the hyper focused person. If I learn something or I take something from Stuart McGill, from DNS, from FRC, I'm always going to credit where it comes from. And I think that's so important. And again, especially now in the time of the internet era, where it's almost like people have this mentality that it's going to take away from them being seen as an expert, where I feel, and have heard it time and again, in fact, what it does is it actually makes people go, oh, I can trust this person more because they're willing to show and guide me where they're getting their information from, not keeping it hidden and going, no, I came up with this. I think it's so important to acknowledge and really point people in directions that can help, because we don't have all the answers. There is no one system. And I'll say, even for us, we'll tell people we're not a cure-all, but we're a cure-a-lot. For most systems, I'd say you're not a cure-all. And it's important to let people know what other tools they might want to explore.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a cure-all. The body is too different. Situations are too different. Life is too different.
Well, I think that goes to the whole culture of foundation training. And as I hear more about your guys' stuff, for example, it appeared to me that within your story, it took a very long time to put all these things together, because there's a lot of different moving pieces. And then it's like, okay, as you put these pieces together, it's like, how do I sequence them to get the most benefit for this issue, for this issue, for this issue? And I give you all the credit in the world, because you did that when you basically had no income, and you kept the course on the development because you believed in this strongly, or you don't get through those hard times of, well, how am I going to pay the rent? What am I going to eat for dinner next week? So you set that foundation, using the word, early on. But then, as I heard not long ago, I think that somebody asked you about monetizing your YouTube channel, and you're like, well, I'm not going to monetize. I want this information to be out there so other people can learn and help. And you guys also, I heard you say that it's not just like one system. It's, if something's working, we want to understand that better. So as I've been involved or worked with other professionals, and it's usually people who are at the very highest echelon who have that attitude of, no, this is shit and you got to do this instead. I guess because they've done so much, and that's repetitive for a lot of different disciplines that I've seen, not just in physical fitness, but in golf clubs and design and things like that. But you guys, even with the success you have, you haven't adopted that mantra. You've kept true to the culture that you started with and basically evolved from, is what I'm seeing from the outside.
I think that's very accurate. I started this, and I started it first by myself, and then by the time I graduated chiropractic school, I pulled my dearest friend, Dustin Duricki, who was also finishing chiropractic school at the time, and this is 2008. This was very early. Dustin and I started teaching. I was initially teaching kind of like this idea of classes, and would do public donation-based classes, and then Dustin came in. And very slowly, from 2009 until 2011, we framed this idea of, I think we have something here. People do it and seem to get better very quickly. We didn't have a name or anything yet. We started calling it Foundation around the end of 2009. A lot of that was by design, in the sense of like, yeah, it's going to take a long time to build this. I feel very confident in it. I think one day we're going to do really well from this. But a lot of it was also, that was the only option that I had. And I want to be very clear about that. I don't want to give any misunderstanding. I had to work my ass off. I would have been basically an unemployed, educated chiropractor, unable to practice as a chiropractor at the time because I was A, so focused on this, and B, it took me 5 years to pass my boards after I graduated chiropractic school. I did not create foundation training out of intelligence. I created it out of complete need. And the ability to be the person I wanted to be in the world was very intensely challenged from 2006 to about 2009, to the point that I almost folded. I came very close not to doing anything for very myriad reasons. From 2009 until now, 13 years, this has been me growing up into myself. Foundation training has provided me the opportunity to better understand myself, both through feeling and through teaching. It's let me interact with people at their worst, bringing them up, and that has absolutely brought me up to a better version of myself this past over a decade. So what you see now out of foundation training isn't something that I stirred the pot and designed and created. I have jumped into the current, and I started the current, and I believe that. But what happened is guys like Jesse and Dustin and Paul, and at the time Brian, and people that came through this current with me, my God, did they make it move faster. My God, did they make it a better current to be in. And they pulled in other people that the integrity, the work ethic, the character and compassion that our team, our current team has, is second to none. It's extraordinary. We have helped people all over this world, and the only thing we want to do is help people all over this world. Luckily, and I say that so seriously, the business has begun succeeding. This is the road of foundation training. Right now, it's starting to be like a little higher. Our graph is moving into a much better trend.
It was a true startup. I mean, if we really step back and look, it's been a true startup. And, like when people from the outside have helped give advice, you're going, you guys have managed to do what most startups don't do, which is figure things out and keep driving in a positive direction.
Keep it going. That's the biggest thing is I mean, what most people don't understand is showing up and doing the work is a major part of succeeding. Some people, I mean, and I'm still a small podcast. I've been doing this now. It's coming up on 3 years. I think you guys are pushing 75 episodes, but I have found it extremely enjoyable to meet guys like you. And that was, I think, Doc, that's when I emailed you that was the name 360 when you said, you guys aren't solely focused on golf. I said, I don't care. because you encompass, I think, the reason I called it the name I do is that I can bring in someone like you guys. I can bring in a Marine colonel. I can bring in golf coaches, people who specialize in golf training, and anything that has to do with golf to the benefit, I mean, selfishly of myself, because I get to learn this. It helps the people that I work with, but to the benefit of a lot of people out there who might not be so social media savvy that now they're introduced to you. If I can be that conduit, then I for me, that's a huge thing that I love doing. That's why I love doing this
We
podcast.
appreciate it, man. That's how
But
we
just and I've looked at stuff. I'm sitting there like, okay, I spend this money, I get it edited and do the publication. It costs me money, and I'm not making any money on it. But it's like, why do I do it? And it's like, well, I'm having a lot of fun doing it.
That's part of half the purpose
like,
in life, right?
Yeah, and it pushes you forward. It gets you through those times. It's like, well, okay, here's another check to this subscription I got to pay for to keep this thing going. But it keeps you going. And if it takes off someday, great. But if it does, I never got into this for finances on this. If there was a list of 100 reasons I did this, was 101. I never did it for the finances. One thing I want to get into is I heard you talk a number of times. You were getting into a lot more on nutrition and its effect on the body. Is that, you guys still pursuing that? And can you talk about that a little more?
I'm trying to understand nutrition better for my personal well-being, my family's, my friends, my patients. I don't really advise that much on nutrition unless it's something that's very clear in somebody. But I do have a lot of people that I refer to from both like a doctoral level to like a strength coach that just really went down the deep end of understanding nutrition from a hormone standpoint. So I more have like the people that I refer out to that. That being said, my life is going to be spent trying to understand nutrition because that's how people heal ultimately.
Mm-hmm. I know I'll butcher this. You can correct me. The endogenous cannabinoid that you've talked about.
ECS.
Can you discuss
ECS,
that?
I'm going to give a very roundabout kind of overview of the system in this one.
And I'll tell you why I asked that, because a couple of years ago, and I remember specifically at the Masters one year, that there were a couple of extremely high-profile golfers that were chewing gum. And through some of the people I know that are still connected at that level, they were telling me that those guys were chewing CBD gum to help with all the things that CBD does. Yes. So I found it very interesting. Maybe it was just timing that was coming about as I started to hear you talk about some of those things. And I'm like, I got to ask him about this a little more because it's very interesting.
Well, I'm a big fan of the cannabinoid industry and the capacity of CBD, THC, the myriad of other elements in hemp and cannabis plants that can affect the human body. But what it turns out is that we have this endogenous cannabinoid system, the ECS system. It's not special to humans. It's in every single mammal, every single vertebrate in the world. And it seems, based on all evidence, all research, anybody can go research, Google peer-reviewed, so that you know it's legitimate, peer-reviewed ECS. That will get you 100,000 things of research papers and anecdotes and interesting ideas on what this plant's interactions in the body can do. For this podcast, for the purpose of this process, I would recommend anybody taking painkillers on a regular basis quickly look into the impact of CBD and low dosage THC on pain. Anybody that is dealing with intention tremors or anything that is associated with Parkinson's or other dopamine reduction ailments that affect the nervous system, balance, coordination, all those things, look immediately to the impact of THC on intention tremors and on the nervous system, in particular dopaminergic issues. The ECS, the endogenous cannabinoid system, seems to function as the grand homeostasis conductor in the human body, as long as it is fed accurately, which is very easy to do. Your body needs to have the building blocks for two very specific neurotransmitters. Anandamide, which is called the bliss molecule, it's made within us. It's made from simple fatty acids, and glycerol, which is the breakdown of sugar and fermented alcohol. So you don't have to drink a bunch of beer. That happens naturally in the gut pretty easily through digestion. And the other one is 2-arachidinol glycerol, long name, it's known as 2-AG. These are the prominent, made within us cannabinoids that stimulate the endogenous within us cannabinoid system that is in every tissue type in the human body. It is a very vast, widely distributed network of receptor cells in the body. And those receptor cells are stimulated by either the ones we make ourselves, anandamide, 2-AG, or the ECS, and those receptor sites are stimulated by smoking a little pot, having a THC tincture, having a CBD tincture, taking from outside of the body the natural stimulants of this receptor site. Once the stimulation occurs, that's when a whole remarkable series of physiological sequences in the body occurs to make our next movements more efficient, our next breath, our next digestion, our next brain to nerve or nerve to brain sensations or outputs. It yields a more impactful, more effective efficiency in the body. And that's the basis of this system, is to not let stress and problems dictate the efficiency of our body. Instead, to put a little bit of bliss, a little bit of joy, a little bit of relaxation into the system, a little bit of anti-anxiety, so that the body can actually naturally function in a more focused, better position, better place, better sensation. For a golfer, that means I'm feeling anxious, my back hurts. I'm going to take these supplements so that I feel a little better and I can actively improve through the enhanced adaptability of this system that wants our body to be efficient and makes it move towards efficiency. You're using that adaptive window to improve yourself right before you go in, whatever it might be. That's how we correlate the endogenous cannabinoid system to movement and health by the same way we do with any other painkiller. It gives you the window to heal yourself without as much pain.
So, because golfers are notorious for taking, I'm not going to name the name, what's called the scientific, the acetaminophen and all the other, one that's going to attack your gut, one that's going to beat the hell out of your liver. And they usually take these before a round so that during the round they don't feel the pain and they can play pain-free. When would they take the...
There's not really a timing. You just want to have that stuff in your system to a small amount. Small amount, barely noticeable, completely to your own tolerance. You're not going to overdose on it, but you might feel kind of crummy if you go a little bit too much THC. You might feel pretty nauseous. So you definitely start with the CBD if you're new to this arena. That being said, do your own research. You're going to find a number of positive responses, and then you'll find every now and then, it's like bullshit, it's this or that. Make your own decision, do your own research. That's how I come to everything I come to.
I would say, go ahead.
I was taking CBD to help some sleep when I was having some trouble sleeping a few years ago. I was waking up between 2:30 and 3:30 every single night for at least an hour and a half. And I was taking some, and then my brother had a client that had started a CBD company that they had some trace amounts of THC in it. And he goes, well, here, you want to really help sleep, try one of these things. And I took that, and I swear to God, I was in La La Land the entire night. I was sleeping. I was like, what the fuck is going on? and that was the first time I've done anything like that.
I tell people all the time, it's got to be placebo. And just if that's what works for you, great. Who cares what the reason is?
Yeah, well, I actually didn't like it. I never got into good sleep. It was like I was just stoned out of my mind, half asleep.
Oh, that's no
all night.
No. One of the I would recommend trying, because I just did this with a bunch of surfers in Mexico. I was down there, and the guys at Proscriptions, which is a team of doctors, sent us their new product they have, which is called TroCalm. And it's this little orange square. You can break it into 4s, and they literally give you how much calmness do you want? Do you want anti-anxiety? Do you want to just chill out? Do you want to be zonked out? That would be the full thing. What we were playing with in Mexico at the end of surfing all day was taking those, you put it up in your gums like you're going to have a dip or something, it dissolves. It's got something called kava in it, which is a root. So it's got kind of a funky flavor, but if you've had kava before, you'll be like, oh, okay, kind of a numbing, funky flavor. But we were taking that and stretching and just going to a nice calming. That's where I'd say, like, that person going, how do I start to use it? And I would say whether it's, they call that TROCOM, but whether you're trying that, a CBD, a THC, do that in the evenings and go into some stretching, a calming, a breath practice before bed, calming your system down. And you just might find you sleep a lot better. Make sure, I mean, we've seen enough times, I'm not going to touch on diet and nutrition, but there's enough research out there that people deficient in magnesium will have a really hard time sleeping. So like I love ZMA before bed, zinc, magnesium, and B6. That helps replenish testosterone, they say, but also I find that I am out cold in the best of ways and waking up feeling really good. But Trocom was really cool.
Yeah, I remember years ago, I was a big Charles Poliquin fan. And I had Preston Green, who was his protege. He was on the show early on when I started it. Magnesium being a big thing that I found out when I was still playing, training a lot. And I started taking magnesium. I think I was reading Charles's material in about 2008 or 9. And he was very big on magnesium. And I started to sleep like a baby. Like I'd wake up in the morning and wonder where the hell I was. I'd be in my own bed. I'm like, this is amazing. And then I started reading on it when I got off playing professionally and was coaching more, using it as a neurotransmitter developer, as people were trying to learn something. And I kind of got off it then. I was getting a little too deep for, I didn't need to know that to be an effective coach. And I'm like, this is a little too far. But yes, to your point, magnesium, I think, is a huge thing that many people are depleted. And if they take the right kind with all the different lates, right? You could take the wrong one and you'd be on the toilet. You can't get away. And don't take too much. I made that mistake one day. I'm like, well, if 500 milligrams is good, maybe 750 is even better. And I was playing around the golf, and I had to run back to the clubhouse 3 times because I could. I'm like, what the hell is going on? But yeah, I'm glad you said that.
A little goes a long way.
You had brought up, Jesse, surfing. Dr. Michael Hollis, who's a naturopath, he's in LA, who I've had on a couple of times, and he works with a lot of very, very high-profile athletes. At least that's the rumor. He will never admit to it. But I guess he can't because he's not allowed to with client privilege and so on. But he's been on twice, and we've had a lot of discussions about things like that. But he was working with a surfing team out in Yalis area in Hawaii one time that they were vitamin D deficient, and nobody could figure it out. They're like, how are you outside all day and you're vitamin D deficient? And what he found out was, and he got into in one of my shows, the cholesterol and the chemicals it releases in the sweat, and then the sweat and the absorption of vitamin D from the sun. And he said these guys, because they were washing their sweat off all day constantly, their ability to absorb vitamin D was significantly compromised. And once that they got them on a supplement program, it changed the world for them. I mean, that world is, you talk about going down a deep dive into something, that nutritional world and the tangents and the tentacles that thing reaches out to, you could get lost in there. Next thing you know, they're sticking in a white padded room with a jacket that ties behind you. You go down the wrong direction.
Well, I think it's important you find people you trust. Find like, I seldom have new things come up that I don't bounce it off of Eric. And what I often do is like, most of the podcasts I listen to are with different doctors or with different doctors as guests. And what I generally will do is pay attention when I hear the same supplements being talked about again and again across the board, and not, and so when I start, then I go, okay, let me look into that. I write it down. Vitamin D was one that kept coming up at the start of COVID, even before COVID, but like again and again, vitamin D, discussions on vitamin C, vitamin K, like magnesium. And so, okay, hey, maybe I should look into these. Oh, spirulina and chlorella, we're not getting enough in our food. Look, so do your own research, but I look for that kind of stuff, the patterning. Yeah.
The common denominators that repetitive doctors.
Yeah. And I always going to bounce it off. That's my other one that I'm hands down of when talking with a doctor. And I heard the statistic recently that 70% of things that you get given from a doctor diagnosis, that if you went to another doctor, they'll say no and do something completely different. So that makes me go, so much of it is opinionated that this is that team thing. Being willing to like have multiple people you talk to and bounce off of and be open to different perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Very, very much so. And there's the internet is a good in the way that you can find things like, as I said before, as I found you guys, and it can also be a very scary place that you start trying things that you probably shouldn't be if you don't have someone who's knowledgeable enough to at least guide you in a direction that says maybe you should check with this person who I know before you start throwing stuff into your body to try to fix something, because it could work the other way. One question I didn't get to ask you earlier is in a lot of your poses that there's the sphere. Is it the sphere of influence with the hands?
I like that.
What is? I got it completely wrong.
Sphere of tension.
Not on purpose. Sphere of tension. So what is the purpose of the sphere of tension? Because I heard Eric talk about it a little bit on as I was watching some more stuff on YouTube this morning. But can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because people might see it and they might start wondering, what the hell is he doing?
So the sphere of tension is named that way because it's an outward expansion kind of exercise. So if Jesse wanted to right now, he would be trying to pull my arms apart, and I won't let him. But then he'll try to push them together, and I won't let him do that either. It's kind of this opposite and equal forces meeting in the center, which is the basis of any isometric contraction. What we're doing with this, though, is we're closing the kinetic chain of the brachial plexus. So the brachial plexus is these joints right here, and the nerve endings that come through them into the hands, and they also travel down the dorsal scapular nerve into the latissimus, into the lat muscle, very, very important muscle.
So that distribution system for people who are listening, that's at the knotty point of your neck, kind of at the base of your neck.
Yeah, so the neck is the cervical vertebra, and it's the last three cervical vertebrae before they meet your shoulders. And that confluence of nerves, maybe four, that confluence of nerves basically gives you all upper limb sensation, movement, strength, grip strength, all of that. And the sphere of tension is what's called a closed kinetic chain, meaning there's no loss of force. There's no loss of electrochemical energy in that system. You're not trying to figure out where your hands are in space. There's this closed chain that is pressurizing and contracting within itself, like a perpetuating strength system. What we can do with that is we can use the grip of the hands, the width of the wrist, the width and density of the elbow, the width and density of the shoulder, the width and density of the lat to actually widen and broaden the neural pathways. And if we get really good at pulling the lats down and broad as we lift the back of the skull up, we're creating an alignment that gives more space to those individual nerve roots as well. So what the sphere of tension does is A, it lets you know where your hands are on space. B, it closes the kinetic chain so that you're not losing any of the force you're generating within the body. C, it's a somatosensation tool, letting you feel the C6 nerve connection, the C7 nerve connection, the C8 nerve connection, letting you feel those muscles cooperate with the anterior part of the spinal column while you sense through this broad posterior part of the spinal column. So there's everything we do is sort of a treatment and biomechanics lesson within itself. And then you add all of those things together to completely integrate the body head to toe and move from there.
That's awesome. I mean, you don't hear anyone go into that depth. I've never seen until you guys did it, and I'm looking at their hands. I'm like, well, what the hell are they doing with their hands? And I'm like, what is the purpose of that? But I mean, that is so important. This, as far as, in particular for golfers, as they look to the rotational capacity of the swing, and if you don't have that ability to rotate there, and things are disconnected, and you obviously are using your hands and arms to guide your touch and feel, it's like you're at a complete disadvantage. If you're not doing something like that. I found that very interesting. I had to ask you. I'm sorry I waited so long in the show.
No, our work is extremely minimal. Our work is the biggest bang for the buck in any position. We're looking to coordinate as many muscles in conjunction with their own contractions, meaning they contract together. They support one another in any position we're in. The more you do that, the more you realize there's really only a handful of positions the body can really do that in. We have most of them. Not all of them. There's others, but we do have a biomechanical portfolio that's extraordinary that can help people.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see foundation going in the future as you've reached different levels in the business and with helping people, which is obviously the main goal is to help people get out of pain and lead a better, more active life. The pathway that you guys have been on, and as you mentioned, it's now reaching a new higher level to where it's not the lows being so low, but you've reset the standard or the bar. Where do you see it in the next couple years or next 5 years, or is where you guys are taking the business or the company or the product?
A lot of the direction we go in isn't up to us. It's being pulled in a lot of directions. But if I could state sort of my goals for foundation training, I would love to see this work, the base principles, not 25 poses, the base principles of anchoring the pelvis and decompressing the torso, being taught in medical schools, being taught in college anatomy classes, being taught in kinesiology degrees, every physical therapy program, every chiropractic program, every basic personal training program should have these principles at a very central root of their teaching. And it doesn't stop them from teaching anything else, it just makes them better at performing anything else that they're teaching. So that would be my overall, is I want to see this into the academic medical world, and I want to see it become a gold standard of range of motion.
Is the educational establishment have they at least expressed interest or open?
I mean, they don't. There is not an educational establishment. There are numerous people and players and organizations, and we've had a number of schools. We've had a number of collegiate teams. We've had a number of professors. We've had a lot of PhD students do dissertations on our work and kind of create this a lot of master's students that use this as kind of their thesis in their masters. However, we have not seen anything come through real major research, and that's a big part of what we want to do. I would love to see Stanford. I would love to see maybe University of Miami or University of Florida. One of these medical schools bring in our work and test it as hard as they possibly can and do a very significant research study on this. That's one of the other major goals that we have.
Yeah, it seems like if you could get one of them, Johns Hopkins, one of those major, then that would really
We're
skyrocket
tapped in
everything.
with people that I never anticipated being tapped in with. But we're very tapped in, and they love our work. They do it themselves. And I was just on Chris Kresser is very big in the nutrition world. I was just on his podcast about a week ago, and we'll release in a week or two. And part of that conversation with both of us, me and him, like, calling all researchers, foundation training needs studies. Please research this work.
Well, gee, if I can help you in anything in the golf world on doing any studies,
please do.
You just let me know what you need, and I'm happy to do it. As we wind down on time, do you guys? I have some time for I call it the emergency 9, which is what I know you guys aren't big golfers, but it would be if someone played 18 holes and they're arguing who won or who did this or who did that, so they play an emergency 9. So I usually have 9 questions there towards the end, and I it's not golf driven for you guys, so I tweaked it a little bit. So if you got
all right.
And I wrote them down. I could ask you. It's usually pretty fun. So, given that you guys are like to travel and do your things all over the world, and you have your certifications and so on, you've seen a lot of places. But if I gave you $25,000 a plane ticket anywhere you want to go in the world, where would you guys go?
I want to go to Morocco.
Well, that's an
I was
interesting
going
one.
to Hawaii and invest the rest of the $25,000 in a little place that I rent for a couple of years.
I got a lot of waves I want to surf in Morocco, and I want to go to Marrakesh, and then when that's over, I'm going to hop a plane to Egypt and finally see the pyramids. It's on my next 5 years.
That's on my list to see the pyramids. I read a book years ago. What's his name? He's been on Rogan a bunch. Graham Hancock. He wrote a book on the pyramids that. I'll email it to you guys, and if you haven't read it yet, because you read it in your mind, just like there's no way possible that this stuff could be built this finite of measurement.
Our friend is there now, or was just there. The photo, I mean, he truly zeroed in on the pyramids and the history, and they clearly did tours and got into the culture, and it looked. I mean, I've wanted to go for a while, but it made me really want to get over there.
That's the kind of stuff I want to do in my
let's see, Graham Hancock and Michael Bovell, I think, was his partner on that book. the mitering between the stones and the size that I think the size divided by the perimeter, it comes out to pi.
Crazy.
Exactly. It's like, how do you build something like this? But I'll send it to you guys. You can check it out. Speaking of books, last book that you guys read.
I've got like 5 or 6 that I'm in the process of reading. So I'm reading one by Don Miguel Ruiz called The Book of Knowledge, which is his newer one. It's pretty cool. The whole basis of it is what we think we know, what we believe to be truth is just in and of itself also built on patterns and built on things we assume and built on things that have been assumed. Mm-hmm. It's just
I've heard of it. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard of that one.
I'm currently working on The Art of Impossible. I've been taking my time, but amazing book for anybody trying to figure out like learning skill sets. But I just finished finally Into Thin Air from Krakauer on Everest, and that was mind blowing. And I don't know why anybody would want to be up there. I can't for the life of me.
I don't know.
But I'm also born and raised in Florida. I don't mind going in the snow for 4 or 5 days, and then my body's just going, your people aren't meant to be here. It's time to go now.
I sit there and watch those things, Everest. Oh. Like, why would you put yourself in an area where you're dying once you cross?
It blew my mind. Everything I was learning, and then my hat. I got sick while I was in Mexico, and I was, Montezuma's Revenge. I thought it was a good idea to eat ice cream from a street vendor. It was delicious. But I was vomiting and my body was purging. I just was going, those guys are doing this in super thin air, chronic headaches, and for days on end. And they still will wake up sleep deprived and make a push to the top. And I find that amazingly inspiring, but also I go, I know my limits now.
Yep, me too. I was like, there's no way you could give me any amount of money to say, if you do this, we'll pay you.
Nope.
No, not doing it. The Alpinist was a pretty good one. I don't know if you documentary guy. It's about a guy. He's from Canada. He just free climbs mountains, and then I don't want to ruin it for you, but even what's the dude that did free?
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah,
Alex Hangold. He's even in. He's like, I never heard of this guy, and I started watching the mountains he's climbing. I'm like, this.
Closest I'm getting is sitting at the Himalayan Cafe in Encinitas and looking at the photo of Everest and enjoying it and writing my Yelp review discussing how it brings me back to the tops of Everest as I read through Krakauer's book at the end. I've never been.
Yeah, I'll leave mine watching it on TV. If you guys weren't in health professions, what would you be doing?
Stand-up comedy. For real.
Is that really?
Not to do it, but to listen to it, to watch it, I study it quite a lot.
I like to think I would have a coffee shop / surf retreat somewhere really cool. With gathering. I want an environment where people get to gather and talk story and connect.
I'd like to make people feel better.
Well, you could be a performer at this coffee shop.
There it is.
If Hollywood came to you and they said they want to make a movie about your life, who's playing your part? Who's playing you?
He's too old.
Chris Hemsworth is staying playing me.
That's a good question. They got to be.
Salma Hayek for you.
I was going to go with Benicio del Toro. I like Benicio del Toro.
Benny the Bull, he's an awesome actor. I love that guy. All right. Let's see. If you could sit on a bench and talk to anybody in history, for
Hemingway,
who would it be?
Ernest Hemingway. I love his writing.
My dad's
I love his writing. I love what he was about. And I read a book, Hemingway's Adventures. A sailor, a soldier, a spy, and again, inspiring and just really mind-blowing what that guy did. I didn't know he was at D-Day. He was on the boats as a writer. When they stormed the beaches, he was there. And then he got in trouble because he eventually got involved in the fight and wasn't just journaling, but was running a small unit. And it's just inspiring of someone truly chasing life's adventure. Like him, love him, abusive, whatever, I don't care. I'm going to always go, we can dissect anybody and find their faults, but we can also focus on what was truly inspiring about him. I just think he was amazing.
Probably Jack LaLanne for me. I've always been really blown away by his whole story. And he was educated as a chiropractor, never practiced, did his own thing, and really showed how like every decade he would just become better until his healthiest moments of his life were towards the end of it. Which to me, that's amazing. That's somebody I really strive
That's pretty cool.
To exemplify.
You know, I was in the Keys a couple years ago, and we did the Hemingway tour.
6'10" cats.
Reading on him and everything. I mean, yes, his lifestyle where he would get up at like 4 a.m. to start writing, and then write till lunchtime or whenever, eat lunch in his office, and then once he was done, he went down with his buddies and went deep sea fishing, and then got bombed the rest of the afternoon, and then went home, ate dinner, went to bed, and did the whole thing all over again. I mean,
crazy. Well, and that's what I love. If you read his books, not only are you going to get transported back in time, you'll get a glimpse of life. Like Islands in the Stream, when you talk about the Keys, I think is awesome. To have and to have not, awesome. But I never thought I'd say this, but they're also very intense for some people because they were written at a time where, you know, the language used is to nowadays standards. Some people would probably try to take his books off the shelf, you know? So I just say that if you find that stuff triggering, don't read those books.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, something that you happily paid $1,000 or more for.
You know, medical tools, surfboards.
Surfboards in courses, like learning courses. You know, yeah, like I've taken a couple of courses as of recent on presentation delivery, you know, on storytelling, because I've always said I love people with storytelling skills, and it's a lost art, and I want to be better. So I think anything that you're investing to expand yourself is an amazing investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, usually toys or educational stuff.
I want him to pay for a course on how to get on stage as a comedian, because I guarantee there's a course out there for it.
Oh,
acting classes.
I'm not scared of getting on stage. I'll talk to anybody on stage.
Hey, I don't think he needs it without blowing too much smoke. I think that Eric is one of the best presenters.
He is pretty damn good. I give him that. He is good. He can captivate an audience.
Very good orator. Yes, very good orator.
Know what I'm talking about in that I tend to stick very close to like my world, my knowledge, so it makes it a little bit easier. But I appreciate that from both you guys. Thank you.
What would be your guy's superpower?
Oh, no. I want Wolverine. I want the power of rejuvenation. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, man, just that's such a good question, because then I'm going, well, wait a minute. What if I could just hold my breath forever? I could swim. Well, but then pressure would get you. Damn it. I'm going to go with Wolverine. I've always thought his was awesome. The power to just rejuvenate after an injury.
Right, cool.
I think I'm going Superman. I think I'm flying.
Man's eternal quest to fly.
If I had to pick, you know, that would be that. Yeah.
All right. Couple more. Would you rather be able to talk to all animals or all languages?
Animals. Hands down.
Yeah, me too.
All you're going to figure out with people is
it's going to be a lot more rewarding, I think.
You just have different languages. You're going to get talk to a beaver, you got a dolphin.
You know, here's it. You just learn sign language. You got everybody.
Yeah, right.
Every culture.
Yeah, true.
And now the last one is a little golf related. I know you guys aren't big golfers, but you know who, or you would at least have your opinion on who the greatest of all time was.
Yeah. Chubbs Peterson.
Who was that?
I was going to go Chubbs Peterson. Come on, Carl Weathers, man, with the one hand. My mom wouldn't let me play football. Yeah, good idea. She put you in the golf. It would have been Chubbs all the way. No, I'm going to go because he's the only one I know. I go to Tiger Woods because he's who I know. I don't know anybody outside. I honestly don't know anybody else.
Yeah, we genuinely know nothing about golf.
That's fine. I mean, you guys know the body.
Into the driving range.
A lot of people are going to take a lot. Yeah, a lot of people are going to take a lot from this. If they don't, then they got some serious. Then they got problems.
Well, one thing I do want to say for anybody that does look for this or look for help is, if you decide to find an instructor, go to our site, because we upped our program. We've really made an in-depth learning program for our teachers, for our instructors. So if you don't find them listed on our site, then they are not under our umbrella. Because there's a lot of people out there that when asked, oh yeah, I do foundation because they did the 12-minute video and they do other programs. No, if they're not on our site, they either A, did not stay active and do continued education that's required, or B, they are not under our umbrella. I want to stress that.
Yeah, and if anybody gets on your site and looks at the amount of certification people you have, it is global. It is a true global network. It is everywhere. I was on there last night just clicking on different places.
I usually say 1,200 instructors, but Jesse actually corrected me because after the ones we've done since the pandemic, we're now over 1,300.
And it's all walks of life. You've got coaches, you've got chiropractors, you've got physios, you've got occupational therapists, surgeons, construction workers, gold miners, like every walk of life you can think of just about has come through the course at this point. And it's an amazing community of support.
Mm-hmm. What do you guys have coming up that people can go check out? Are you speaking anywhere? Certification courses, classes? What do you have coming up that some people can go to?
Well, no events that are like our certification course that's upcoming is sold out. We will have more certifications on the schedule for next year. A lot of them will be in California. Mm-hmm. That being said, I tend to have kind of a pretty steady speaking engagement or podcast schedule. Nothing crazy, but every week or two we tend to do something. I was just invited to do a talk and a lecture that I'm very excited for. Jesse will be there with me as well. It's not until March, but we're speaking for the entire American Osteopathic Association, which is a very big organization. There will be sounds like well over 1,000 practicing physicians there. And we get the opportunity to really help them understand biomechanics better, which is amazing. I mean, as a chiropractor, being invited into another medical modalities overall conference, it's happened on a couple occasions. It's always gone very well. And I'm so excited for this one because we get all day, by the way, I didn't tell you that, but we basically have 6 hours to lecture with them and do workshops and all that. So we have this entire group for like a day. We're doing the Bob and Brad podcast. I'm excited for that one. Bob and Brad, I didn't realize how kind of beloved they were, but when they announced that we were doing a podcast with them next week, and they're physical therapists, they're the world's most famous physical therapists, and they've got videos and podcasts and like millions of subscribers on YouTube and stuff like that. And that one I'm excited for. Jess and I'll be doing that coming up next week. Jess is doing some really cool training in the jiu-jitsu world with some of the most upcoming athletes in that world these days. I'm learning jiu-jitsu. We're both learning. He's further along than I am, but because of we got the opportunity to work with a number of interesting figures in the jiu-jitsu world, and we really want to be able to create a program that is a standout for, in particular, jiu-jitsu practitioners and the injuries that they face. And in order to do that the right way, we got to do it long term. So he's been learning for a while. I'm now completely committed to learning for many, many, many years to come. And over time, we're going to create some spectacular relief-based videos for the martial arts community.
It's a very addicting sport. I actually did it for about a year and a half, and then my back and neck issue.
Very common story.
I mean, it's people cranking on your neck when you've got C2, C3 issues isn't the best.
Well, I was going to say that's where finding too is. I would also highly stress is finding the right gym for anybody that goes like, I love it or I want to be in there. The other one I'd even recommend for you to look at is Gracie University, because they actually, you don't ever get to roll with anybody until you've gone through all their base principles and become a blue belt. So you're only ever practicing technique, which I've done jiu-jitsu on and off for probably close to 15 years now. And generally was kind of one time I had to stop because of an injury. Popped the knee right away. But that was a catastrophic injury. And ultimately it was, I didn't have any hip range of motion because I'd been doing so much weightlifting for so long and then just thought I was going to go back into a sport I did 10 years ago. So finding the right gym if they have an interest. But as far as travel goes, like I'm always popping up doing workshops randomly, bit of a gypsy. So you can, like I was going to tell you, I'm going to be in North Georgia next weekend. So I don't know where you are in relation to Ackworth, Georgia, but I'll be over there. You could always film a workout or two with me if it wasn't some insane drive that blew your back out just to get there.
No, it's about 4.5 hours. It's not too bad. It's about the same from here to there.
Okay. Well, I got it. We'll talk about it afterwards, but I have one other buddy I need to go see, but I don't know if I'm going to make it to him or not, but he's in North Carolina.
Cool. Awesome. And obviously I'll have the app link, the website link, the video links, anything else you guys, a book or anything?
I just put this one out. This one came out this year. This is what I would consider to be 12 Foundations of Health. We have a
another one I got
forward from Jeff Bridges in this that talks about the 12 years that we've been working together. And he goes into what that book is about, which is not just foundation training, but the understanding that stress can be very good for us. And it goes through the systems in our body that can make stress better for us. And then it talks very in depth on traditional sauna and on the endogenous cannabinoid system and those two pathways for long-term major pain relief in the body.
And it is best to link that to y'all.
That one's on the site. Yeah, we don't sell anything. We don't sell the books on the site, so you have to buy them from like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the booksellers have them. This one,
all right,
this one is an audiobook. This is my first audiobook, and the feedback from it is very good. People enjoy the story, and they enjoy the kind of the anatomy lessons and the physiology lessons throughout it. Jesse's in this book. We have about 10 people that share their routines, their experiences with all these different modalities as well in there.
Cool. Well, I'll have all those links in there for everybody listening. I can't stress enough that you need to check it out. Just try it just one time, and it will make a major difference. And then you can take it from there, be it on the app, be it you contact practitioner, Jesse, Doc Goodman, whoever you need to, just give it a shot and you will not be disappointed. Fellas, I really appreciate it. And I had a blast.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the time.